Baruch Hashem, we are on day number 2 of our daily study of Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam. We're still going over the introductory matter of the book. And as mentioned yesterday, there are 14 principles that the Rambam employs in order to determine what precisely are the 613 commandments. Today we're going to go over the first 3 of those 14 principles. But before we do so, just a little historical background. As I mentioned yesterday, the Rambam was not the first to attempt to identify what precisely are the 613 biblical mitzvahs. We know there's a tradition that there are 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, but we don't know exactly what they are. A previous attempt was composed during the Gaonic period. That's the period right after the redaction of the Talmud, and it is known as the bahag, or the Baal Halachas Gedolos, which was composed by one of the Gaonim in the land of Bavel, which would be modern-day Iraq. And he has his own way of enumerating the 613 commandments. The Rambam takes exception to a number of those. So we are going to refer to that in as we go through the principles, how the Rambam explains why he determines certain things to be mitzvahs and other things not to be mitzvahs. Okay, so the first 3 principles of the 14 principles that Rambam employs. Principle number 1 is that we do not include rabbinic commandments. The bahag includes some rabbinic commandments. The Rambam says, first of all, why would you even think that we should include rabbinic commandments, since we know historically they came after the giving of the Torah? So the Rambam says, well, you might think that they do get included because there's a biblical mitzvah to follow the rabbis, so perhaps you would think that that elevates them to the level of biblical commandments. The Rambam says no, because once you get into the specific rabbinic commandments, how do you know where to end? I mean, if you mention Hanukkah menorah and you mention Megillah on Purim and reading Hallel, which the bahag mentions, at what point do you draw the line? The Rambam says literally thousands of rabbinic decrees and enactments. So, no, we don't include anything that's rabbinic. That's principle number 1. Principle number 2, nor do we include anything that is only known by way of one of the methods of textual exegesis. You know, the Braisa de Rabbi Yishmael that we say in Shachris before Hoidu, the Yud Gimel Midas Shatayda and the Dreshes Bohem, 13 methods of textual exegesis. So the Rambam says any mitzvah that we only know through one of these methods is also not included. So for instance, the bahag will say, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, you should fear the Lord your God. Rabbi Akiva famously says that untranslatable word es, aleph sof, comes to include Talmidei Chachamim, that when it says Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, you should fear the Lord your God, it also includes reverence for Talmidei Chachamim, for Torah scholars. But the Rambam says if you're going to go along that route, then what's going to happen? You're going to also have to include things like when it says Kabed es avicha, you should honor your father, that the S, the rabbis say, comes to hint that it includes also you should honor not only your father, but you should honor your older brother, you should honor your stepfather. But those aren't biblical commandments. The Rambam says those are like branches from the bough of a tree. You know, there's the boughs that come out of the trunk of the tree, and then there are individual branches that come out of the boughs. So the Rambam says the biblical commandments are like the boughs of the tree, and they may have additional branches, but those don't count as additional ones of the 613 biblical commandments. And finally, the third principle of the 14 principles is anything that's specific to a time that was only done during a certain time. So, for instance, the manna, the bread from heaven, which fell during the 40-year sojourn in the wilderness, you weren't allowed to leave it overnight. Okay, well, that's a commandment, but that was only during that time that the Jews were traveling in the wilderness. Or, for instance, not to attack the nations of Ammon and Moav. Well, again, that was only during the time that was that was germane, that was happening when they were passing through those lands. It's not an eternal commandment. And the Rambam points out that the Torah is Torah Tzivalono Mesha Me'erosha Kehilas Yankiv. Me'erosha Kehilas Yankiv means the inheritance of the Jewish people. And inheritance means something that's reached us in our present day. So if it's something that's only applicable historically, then it's not a Me'erosha, it's not considered an inheritance that has arrived to our present day, and therefore it would not be counted. All right, we're going to continue with more of the methods by which the Rambam deduces what exactly are the 613 commandments. We'll continue tomorrow. We are not going to get into any specific mitzvahs yet because, as mentioned, the way that we study the Sefer HaMitzvos is that we go according to the schedule of the 3 chapters of Mishnah Torah. The 3 chapters of Mishnah Torah is going to be spending another few days on the introductory matter of the book before we get into the first chapters of halachas. So correspondingly, the Sefer HaMitzvos study will similarly be spending time on introductory matter. We'll see you tomorrow.